We have to invade. They have Al-Qaeda blowing up stuff, and in the news say, see, we've got to go in. Assad's bad because Al-Qaeda blew stuff up. I mean, my gosh, well said, Paul. Let's come back and explore that more. Then I'm going to give the number out. Stay with us. You know, Brigade Homeland, 4 years ago, the Pentagon admitted they're training 370,000+ troops. They have auxiliary missions for crowd control, civil unrest in the U.S. ahead of the control collapse. Same thing's happening in Europe. Global standardization. We get an Army manual. It's confirmed to be real. And it gets massive traffic on Infowars.com and Prisonplanet.com, but almost no one else picks it up. And if they do, they just say, well, what's wrong with re-education camps? What's wrong with torture? What's wrong with slave labor? So, Paul, I think you need to do an article with a boil down of all of it and just say, you know, proof that media is complicit or you know, media refuses to cover slave labor, U.S. slave labor camp news, and point out the whole thing with the Assad regime, because this is, or maybe a headline, the United States becoming North Korea, or media will not cover U.S. North Korean style slave camps, because we need to punch this out into the media, and because the reason they won't cover this, just like it took a week for my act that we broke to get out in the news and other documents, and Ron Paul's office got calls, and Lord bless him, he's like, we don't know if that's real for a week. They, you know, no one would just call the FBI and find out it was real, or call, you know, the state police there in Kansas or Missouri and find out it was real. We've got to force this out in the open, because of course they're not covering it. It shows how controlled the media is, that this is confirmed slave labor camps, slave labor re-education camps. And it just shows they will not cover it. They will not, because also, it's not just that they're controlled. Then they've got to admit we're right. Then people have got to admit stuff's scary. And this creeping national security state's all around them, Paul.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? They can't cover it because they can't deny it. They can't make up some little excuse about how we exaggerated it, because, I mean, take the article I wrote on Friday. Yes, the re-education camp manual does apply domestically to US citizens. That is 50–60% of it is direct quotes. Most of the rest of it is screenshots. You can't exaggerate direct quotes. You can't put a spin on them when they're directly lifted from the manual itself. So that's why they don't want to cover it. And people deny it because they haven't lived through hundreds of years of history whereby in every country, in every century, a group of people get persecuted, whether it's, you know, Jews in Nazi Germany, blacks during the slavery era, Catholic priests in 16th century England that had to hide in priest holes because goons would come and try and hunt them down and kill them. And the 21st century is going to be the century of persecution of political dissidents. And this whole thing about building detainment, internment camps to house them is a central part of it. But people can't handle it because they haven't lived through history, they don't know history, and they think that just because we've got computers and satellite television and smartphones that none of this can happen, even though it's happened in every other century throughout history.
Again, I liken it to one roach you see, and then you see 20. There's thousands. If you're seeing 20 roaches when you turn the light on, that means there's thousands in your house, you know, in the basement and the crawl spaces. They have lined up this giant operation, you know, 50 times, literally, bigger than the Manhattan Project of total control, surveillance. The cops all feel like they're special because they're part of it and have the military with them on gun raids and stuff. It's all illegal. There's just a giant national security state bringing the drugs in. It's so corrupt. Now it snatches little kids. I mean, it's just, people have no idea that just all around them is pure evil. And then, Paul, I just don't know what to do. I mean, this is incredible.
Well, people wouldn't have believed that the federal government would have hired goons to feel up kids and, you know, get on buses and interrogate people. But it's happening. It's happening right now. So stop living in denial.
Paul Watson, I want to come back and give you 2 or 3 minutes to finish any other points you've made, but just incredible points so far. Help us save this country and the world, folks. This is so real. Look at it. It's all around you. Oh, man. Obviously, some people are listening. 5 million guns a month being sold. This is Alex Jones with 5 good reasons you should consider buying a work. All right, I wanted Paul Watson just to give you a general briefing on this plan. This is not a contingency plan. It is the manual of the takeover of America and the arrest of political dissidents that don't want to go along with the New World Order. We have all the other training manuals of who they're going after. It's gun owners, conservatives, libertarians, returning veterans, retired police officers, anybody who isn't going to go along with total socialism leading into communism. But again, run by big banks who are offshore, who want to destroy the economy, re-educate the population, transfer the wealth to themselves, and then come in with a fake revolution like with the Russians and call it free market, but where everybody's poor except for a tiny elite. That's really the model, is they bring in the socialism, then the communism, then that implodes, and they bring in fascism. And of course, in the colleges the globalists have financed and run, they don't teach that. They teach socialism and communism are at odds with fascism. But in all the top globalist documents that I've read, and things written by people like Carol Quigley, Tragedy and Hope, who's one of their top historians, he explains that fascism or neo-feudalistic serfdom control sits atop the socialist combine. Then they bring in the red terror commie level next. We're getting ready for that. They would like to bring it in. The fact that we're here raising the alarm may back it off. Again, if you just joined us, I'm Alex Jones. This is Infowars.com. We have Infowars Nightly News every night at 7 o'clock. I want to do this again today. I've got all this incredible world news, all this stuff happening. The big elections in Europe. I covered some of that at the start of the last hour, but none of that is important compared to the giant police state that's being rolled out now that's been built behind the scenes. Re-education camp manual includes rules on isolating political prisoners. Document also describes slave labor. Paul uses the term forced labor. And under FEMA, the 10 regions, under the FEMA Corps, all of this, the clergy response teams, the InfraGard, the citizen spies, it's for the American people. It isn't for Al-Qaeda. Al-CIA, duh. Al-Qaeda is run by the CIA, duh. Al-CIA, duh. And the CIA doesn't work for the United States. It works for the foreign banks. On record. That's what's happened. Europe's been conquered by Goldman Sachs. We've been conquered through fraud. And they plan on using total police state to enforce their capture. The United States has been captured. They're now moving in to try to censor the web and talk radio. They're now trying to mop up the resistance. I got news for them. Too late. We already sent out the emergency transmissions. And don't look at the mall Martians and the zombies out there and think you've got America beaten. There is a large core of people that, quite frankly, is growing. It's over 25% that is really figuring out what's going on. There's about 5% that's super hardcore. 25% is accelerating their awakening. 40 to 50% is somewhat awake. Congress has a 9% approval rating. Most people, though, have just given up and just said that's a bunch of crooks. And it's time to give the number out. I want to hear from police and military. I've told you all this was coming. I told you TSA on the streets was coming. I told you that your appliances were surveilling you. It was in all the patents and admitted. I told you all this is now admitted. All this is now admitted. What do we do now that I've been proven right? Not because I'm smart. It's all public. I saw them say the G20 in Pittsburgh was the model for the rest of the world. I saw them 12 years ago. 13 years ago in 99, say no free speech in Seattle on video. The First Amendment has been suspended. They said it on the news and on loudspeakers. I've witnessed it everywhere. They do these little mini martial laws and bring cops in from everywhere to test and make sure when they set off some nukes or something or release a bioweapon and pose as saviors on the news to make sure you go along with it. And they're going to have fake militia groups attack local police and people to get the war started, to get the civil war started, just like the globalists blew up Shiite and Sunni mosque to get each other killing each other in Iraq. That was part of that plan. That's been declassified. They're planning on this. Are we going to do it? I want to hear from the police and military. 800-259-9231. A couple of police calling last Thursday, and I'm like, have you done warrant service with military in police uniform? Yes, we have. See, the general public doesn't even know that. So, are you in a free country? Can you call in and talk about this stuff? What won't you put up with? Do you really buy the returning veterans are going to be the big terror group? Well, I guess when you try to take their kids and put them in re-education camps, they're going to start killing people, and they're going to be called terrorists. Understand, that's the plan. They're going to start fights with the American people and back us into corners, and when we defend ourselves, we're going to be called terrorists. Well, let me tell you who the terrorists are. It's the stinking foreign occupational government we've got that paid $20+ billion to move General Motors factories overseas. The terrorists are the people that have had the autism rate go from 1 in 25,000 to 1 in 58. The terrorists are the people butchering our Bill of Rights and Constitution. All right, I'm done. Toll-free number to join us, 800-259-9231. Police and military, I want to hear from you. 800-259-9231. 800-259-9231. I mean, what is it going to take? Are you going to just go along with the system because of peer pressure, because you think you'll be safe doing that? Because they plan on eliminating the patriots in this country and the police and military by having us kill each other. That's the globalist model, is divide and conquer. I don't want to be part of this. But it's clear now, looking at the tea leaves, looking at all the signs that are there, one of the main options, one of the main cards in the globalist hand, in their fist, is staged terror attacks, starting provocations, and going for a gun confiscation to start a civil war. The NRA's milquetoast, folks, and they came out last year and said, yes, they've got internal memos and documents that Obama plans to, quote, ban guns. That's the headline in his next term. Well, Romney will do it too. Let me tell you something. They nuke a city and Romney tells people to turn their guns in. A lot of them are. All right, going back to Watson. Watson, give people a final briefing. We're going to go to break and come back with phone calls.
Well, I found a definition on re-education camps, and it's re-education through labor, also called Laojiao, a form of penal detention in China or the Soviet gulags for, quote, re-education of class enemies and reintegrating them through labor into the Soviet society. And in this manual, this army manual that applies to US citizens, it says that the PSYOP team will be responsible for, quote, using indoctrination programs to reduce or remove antagonistic attitudes, as well as targeting, quote, political activists with such indoctrination programs to provide, quote, understanding and appreciation of US policies and actions. And then, as I said earlier, page 281, it says, reorienting or re-educating the IR facility population is, again, a role of the PSYOP officer. So admitted re-education camps, forced labor camps, applies to US citizens, and yet nothing whatsoever in the mainstream media. People should take these articles and just bombard ABC, CNN, all of them with these articles and say, are you going to cover this? What if President Assad in Syria was advocating forced labor camps, re-education camps for the rebels, the glorious Al-Qaeda rebels? Do you think they'd cover it then? Well, of course they would, but they're not covering it now because this applies in America. It's a direct threat, and it's another glaring example of how America is turning into a militarized police state. And
by the way, I've talked to the troops, but I've seen it myself in an MIT magazine. They brag. Everything done in Iraq with checkpoints, face scans, all of that, national ID cards, that's the model for Western countries. We are the enemy. The bankers run our military. And they're coming in with a system where our entire country is a giant re-education camp.
Yeah, that's why they've got 9,300 checkpoints they had last year. TSA's getting more funding. They're going to have even more checkpoints this year. And what's Iraq full of? Checkpoints, because it's an occupied country. America is fast becoming an occupied country.
Every new movie I watch that's an action movie is they say, oh, just a routine checkpoint in the countryside, in the city. They show every movie I see now, checkpoints, and they always say, oh, just a routine checkpoint. That's government propaganda placement in all the shows. I mean, folks, do you realize how deep we are in this? We are under total psychological warfare attack. This is a vicious